A poor girl crouches down at the school fair, using her old skirt to hide her feet. The young billionaire asks why she isn't playing with the other children. She answers, "My mom didn't have any money, and I'm ashamed. They laugh at my old, dirty sneakers." He kneels down and starts crying when he sees her feet. It was a bright Friday, and Hope Elementary School was even more bustling than usual. The courtyard sparkled under the autumn sun, transformed by the magic of colorful balloons swaying in the breeze. Intertwined streamers hung from tree to tree, creating a festive canopy over the heads of the children running between food stands. The scent of fresh popcorn mingled with the sweet aroma of cotton candy, while lively music boomed through the speakers, inviting everyone to join in the celebration. Hope Elementary School was celebrating its founding anniversary. 40 years serving the community, shaping generations, planting seeds of knowledge that had blossomed into doctors, teachers, artists, and entrepreneurs. It was a special day, and all who had once walked its hallways were invited to return, relive memories, and reconnect with the place that had helped mold part of who they were. Among the guests who entered through the main gate that afternoon, one name in particular caused a stir among the older teachers. Ethan Parker, 25 years old, was now the face on business magazines, the young prodigy who had created an educational technology startup valued in the millions. But to Hope Elementary, he was simply one of its children who had soared to success. Ethan arrived discreetly, without the fanfare his name usually drew elsewhere. He wore a blue shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows and dark pants, simple but elegant. His brown eyes surveyed everything with a blend of nostalgia and curiosity. He had returned not only to honor the event, but with a deeper purpose, to figure out how to use his success to benefit the place that had given him so much. "Mr. Parker, what a pleasure to have you back," exclaimed Mrs. Martinez, his former math teacher, now with silver strands sprinkled among her dark hair. "Your theorems are still legendary around here." Ethan smiled, hugging the woman who had believed in his potential when he himself had doubts. "You deserve all the credit, Mrs. Martinez. Your patience was what saved me from failing." As he strolled through the courtyard, each step brought a different memory. Near the water fountain, he had spilled juice on his uniform on his very first day of school. On the playground, he had scored his first goal in an inter-school tournament. In the science lab, he had discovered his passion for problem-solving. Hope Elementary wasn't just a building, it was a mosaic of moments that had shaped the man he had become. Principal Wilson, still the same gentleman with upright posture and a firm voice, gave an emotional speech about the school's journey. He spoke of challenges overcome, achievements celebrated, and Hope Elementary's unwavering commitment to providing quality education for everyone. At that moment, Ethan realized that no matter what improvements he planned to suggest, the heart of the school, its values, remained intact. After the formalities, the party spread across the campus. Old classmates reunited and shared life stories. Current teachers organized games for the children, while older attendees indulged in nostalgia in every corner. A band formed by former students played hits from different decades, creating the perfect soundtrack for that intergenerational celebration. Ethan spoke with staff members, both old and new, interested in understanding the institution's current challenges. He asked questions about infrastructure, teaching resources, technological needs. In his mind, ideas were already forming for projects that could truly make a difference in those students' lives. "Does the science lab still have that faulty microscope?" he asked a biology teacher. "We do, but it hasn't worked in years," the man replied with a resigned smile. Mental note: completely upgrade the science lab. While walking through the corridors now decorated with current students' work, Ethan noted the subtle changes. The walls, once a faded yellow, now sported a light shade of blue. The solid wooden desks had been replaced with more ergonomic models. Blackboards had given way to whiteboards and, in some rooms, projectors hung from the ceiling, signs of a school trying to keep up with modern times, albeit with limited resources. The young businessman returned to the main courtyard, where the party was at its peak. Upbeat music played as children danced in circles, teachers applauded in rhythm, and parents gathered in groups, proudly watching their kids. It was a scene of pure collective joy. Then, something caught his attention, a stark contrast to all that happiness, so striking it felt almost unreal, like a dissonant note in a perfect symphony. In the far corner of the courtyard, partially obscured by the shade of a large tree, was a very small girl, alone. While the other children danced, ran, and played, she stayed still, curled up against the wall. Her brown hair was tied in a simple ponytail, adorned with a red ribbon already showing wear. She wore the school's uniform, a navy blue skirt and a white shirt. But unlike the other kids, there was no smile on her face. Her eyes were fixed on the ground, and her small hands clutched the hem of her skirt, as if trying to hide something. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest, a feeling he couldn't explain. It was as if, suddenly, all the party's joy had drained away, replaced by an instinctive concern for that solitary little figure. Without noticing, he found himself walking toward her. As he approached, he realized just how tiny she really was. Her narrow shoulders were hunched, as though bearing an invisible weight too heavy for her delicate frame. Her eyes, which he glimpsed briefly, were a deep brown, but clouded by what appeared to be held-back tears. Ethan slowed his pace, aware that he didn't want to startle her. He stopped a few feet away and noticed she was acutely aware of his presence. Her body tensed even more, like a small animal ready to flee. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching down to her level. "Why are you here all alone? Isn't the party fun?" The girl's eyes met his for a fleeting moment before returning to the ground. Her fingers clutched the navy skirt hem more tightly. She didn't answer right away, and Ethan waited patiently, sensing that something important was happening there. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet he had to lean in to hear. "Everyone's laughing at my sneakers. They're dirty and old. My mom couldn't buy me new ones." Her words, spoken with a mix of shame and sadness, hit Ethan like a punch to the stomach. He discreetly glanced down and saw what she was trying to hide, a pair of white sneakers, now gray from wear, with partially detached soles and mended laces. In that moment, Ethan felt something awaken inside him, a blend of indignation and determination. He remembered his own childhood, when his family had also struggled financially after his father's death. He remembered what it was like to be judged for things beyond one's control, how words and looks could wound more deeply than any physical blow. He slowly stood up, his gaze sweeping across the courtyard full of happy kids. He noticed a small group of girls occasionally glancing over and whispering, some pointing discreetly. The typical behavior of bullying hadn't changed at all since his school days. Without another word to the girl, Ethan walked toward the center of the courtyard. His heart pounded, driven not by nerves, but by the certainty that he had to do something. He approached the table where the music teacher controlled the sound and asked to borrow the microphone. The man, recognizing the now famous alumnus, handed it over without question. The volume of the music was lowered, and all eyes turned to Ethan. Parents, teachers, staff, and children. The entire party suddenly on pause. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his firm voice echoing through the courtyard. "I'm happy to be back at Hope Elementary, the place that taught me much more than math or history. It was here that I learned about respect, kindness, and the value of every person." He paused, his eyes finding the group of girls who had been teasing the small girl in the corner. "But it looks like some of us have forgotten these fundamental lessons. You should be ashamed. That girl," he gestured subtly toward where she stood, "is braver than anyone here. She showed up today even knowing she might be judged. Sneakers don't measure anyone's worth. Respect does." A heavy silence fell over the courtyard. Some children looked down at their own feet, ashamed. Others exchanged confused glances. The adults present seemed equal parts surprised and thoughtful at the young businessman's words. Ethan handed back the microphone and walked toward the solitary girl. She looked at him now, wide-eyed, surprised and maybe a bit uneasy about the sudden attention. He crouched again to her level and extended his hand. "Would you like to dance with me?" he asked, a gentle smile on his face. The girl hesitated, eyeing his extended hand as if it might be a trap. Then, slowly, she wiped away a tear rolling down her cheek and with a timid smile forming at the corner of her lips, placed her small hand in his. "Yes," she whispered, almost inaudibly. Ethan led her to the center of the courtyard. He signaled the music teacher, who immediately started up a cheerful song. For a moment, everyone stood still, watching the unusual sight, the famous former student dancing with the lonely girl in old sneakers. Then, as if a spell had been broken, other children began joining them. Soon, the courtyard was once again filled with dancing and music. But something had changed. The looks aimed at the little girl were no longer mocking but inclusive. And there in the center, spinning awkward circles, were Ethan and his new friend, whose name he still didn't know but whose spirit had profoundly touched his heart. For the first time since he'd arrived at the party, he saw a genuine smile light up her face, a smile that completely transformed her eyes, now shining like stars on a clear night. In that moment, under the autumn sun and amid children's laughter, something important began. Something that would forever change not only that little girl's life, but also that of Ethan Parker, the successful entrepreneur who rediscovered, in that school courtyard, the true meaning of making a difference in the world. The celebratory party ended as evening fell. The food stands were dismantled, the balloons collected, and the children left one by one, escorted by their parents. Custodial staff now roamed the courtyard, picking up discarded cups and leftover food. The music had stopped, replaced by the quiet sounds of chairs being stacked and tables folded. Ethan remained on site even after most of the guests had gone. He helped put away some equipment, talked with teachers about possible infrastructure improvements, but his thoughts kept returning to the little girl with the worn sneakers. After they danced, she had smiled shyly, thanked him in a barely audible whisper, and vanished into the crowd of children. The sky had taken on orange hues when Ethan finally decided to look for someone who could give him more information. He spotted Mrs. Lambert, the art teacher, gathering children's drawings that had been on display during the party. "Mrs. Lambert," he called, approaching the grey-haired woman with kind eyes. "May I ask you a question?" "Of course, Ethan," she replied, adjusting her glasses on her face. "It's wonderful to see that some of our former students have become not only successful, but also kept their values. What you did today was very beautiful." Ethan put his hands in his pockets, suddenly aware that his curiosity might seem odd. "That little girl I danced with, who is she?" The teacher smiled, as though she had anticipated this question. "Emily," she answered fondly. "A special child. She's on a full scholarship, one of the sweetest we have here." Ethan nodded, letting the information sink in. Emily, a simple, delicate name. It suited her. "Does she always stay by herself like that?" Mrs. Lambert sighed, placing the colorful sheets of paper into a folder. "Unfortunately, yes. Emily is quiet and observant. She has trouble fitting in. Some children can be cruel to anyone who's different." Different? She just seemed shy and... Shy, yes. But she's also our only full scholarship student in that grade. The other children come from families with more resources. Even with uniforms, those differences show up in the little details. School supplies, lunchboxes, shoes. The teacher paused meaningfully on that last word. "I see," murmured Ethan, recalling the shame in Emily's eyes when she talked about her sneakers. "She lives alone with her mother, who works as a seamstress, an incredible woman, I must say. She does wonders with the little she earns, just so her daughter can get a quality education." Ethan felt a mix of admiration and sadness. He knew this reality well. His own mother had worked 2 jobs to support him after his father's death. "Does her mother know what happened today about the kids teasing her sneakers?" Mrs. Lambert shook her head. "Emily probably won't tell her. She hates to worry her mum." A silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sound of doors closing elsewhere in the school. Ethan looked out the window, noticing the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. An idea began to form in his mind. "Mrs. Lambert, would you happen to have their address?" The teacher paused what she was doing and looked directly at Ethan, her eyes probing his intentions. "May I ask why?" Ethan hesitated. He couldn't fully explain how he felt. only that he had to do something. "I want to help," he said finally. "It's not charity, I can't explain." She reminded me of myself as a kid. My mom struggled so hard to keep me in this school too. The teacher studied him for a few seconds, as though she could see through his words. Then her expression softened into a compassionate smile. "Come with me to the office." They walked through the now silent halls of Hope Elementary. Ethan noticed how the walls needed a fresh coat of paint, how some light fixtures had burnt out bulbs. More items for his mental list of improvements. In the administrative office, Mrs. Lambert opened a file and searched through it. While she flipped through documents, Ethan noticed a stack of worn textbooks on a nearby table. "Here it is," she said at last, writing something down on a small piece of paper. "They live in Maple Creek, not too far from here." She handed him the paper and added in a serious tone, "I'm trusting your judgment, Ethan. You were always a sensitive boy, despite that tough guy front. I just ask that you respect their dignity." Ethan tucked the paper carefully into his shirt pocket. "I promise." Before leaving, he turned back to the teacher one last time. "One more thing I'd like to know. Does Emily have any specific interests? Something she really likes?" Mrs. Lambert smiled, her eyes shining. "Drawings. She loves to draw. She has a natural talent for it, in fact. She creates entire stories through her drawings, but she often lacks the proper materials, colored pencils, markers, special paper." Ethan nodded, mentally adding another item to his to-do list. "Thank you for everything, Mrs. Lambert. No need to thank me." "And Ethan," she called when he was already at the door, "whatever you're planning, take it slow. Life hasn't given Emily and her mother many reasons to trust others." With that warning in mind, Ethan left the school. The night sky was now completely starry, and a cool breeze carried the scent of the school's garden flowers. As he walked to his car, he couldn't stop thinking about Emily, about the shy smile she had flashed when she finally allowed herself to dance, about how her eyes had briefly lit up before she slipped away again into the crowd. It wasn't just compassion he felt. It was a connection, a recognition. Under different circumstances, that might have been his story too. And maybe, just maybe, he was in a position to rewrite its ending. With that resolve, Ethan drove off, already planning his next visit, not to the school this time, but to the small house in Maple Creek, where a girl named Emily lived with her seamstress mother, drawing colorful worlds to escape the gray reality of worn sneakers and cruel glances. Saturday dawned with a clear sky and a gentle breeze, swaying the leaves along the streets of Maple Creek. Ethan drove slowly, checking house numbers, a small package on the passenger seat. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a white t-shirt and sneakers, in a conscious attempt not to appear intimidating. Maple Creek was a working-class neighborhood. Modest houses lined narrow streets, some in need of repairs, others maintained with clear care despite limited means. Children played on sidewalks, enjoying the weekend, while adults tended small gardens or washed cars. Ethan finally found the address. It was a small brick duplex, with a tiny front yard where a few wildflowers grew. The paint on the door was peeling slightly, but the doorstep was meticulously clean. A vine framed the front window, adding a bit of green that softened the home's modest facade. He took a deep breath before parking, wondering for the 100th time if he was doing the right thing. He didn't want to come across as intrusive or patronizing. Mrs. Lambert had been clear about respecting the dignity of that family, and that was his intention. But how to do so without seeming like he was meddling in lives that weren't his to interfere in? "Just a visit," he murmured to himself, picking up the package. "Just to see if they're okay." The path to the door was short, made of uneven stones laid over the soil. Ethan noticed small, colorful footprints here and there, probably Emily's, he thought, smiling. He rang the doorbell and waited, his heart inexplicably racing. To his surprise, it wasn't an adult woman who answered, but Emily herself. She opened the door just a crack at first, peeking out with a curious eye. But when she recognized Ethan, her face lit up with a smile that seemed to transform her entire expression. She opened the door fully, momentarily forgetting her shyness. "It's the dance man," she exclaimed, her eyes shining with joy. Before Ethan could reply, a female voice came from inside the house. Emily, who's at the door, honey? Quick footsteps approached, and a young woman appeared behind the girl. She wore an apron over a simple blouse, and her hair was tied in a practical bun. A needle and thread in her hands suggested she had been interrupted during work. Mom? It's the man who danced with me at school, Emily said, bursting with excitement that surprised Ethan, given how quiet and withdrawn she had been when he first saw her. The woman looked at Ethan with an initial expression of surprise, quickly replaced by a warm smile. Please, come in, she invited, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. I'm Grace, and Emily's mother. She hasn't stopped talking about you since yesterday. Ethan stepped inside, immediately noticing the contrast between the modest exterior and the cozy interior. Though the house was small, every inch had been transformed with careful attention. The walls, though simple, were decorated with children's drawings bursting with vibrant colors, clearly Emily's work. Fresh, well-ironed curtains framed the windows, letting in the morning light to brighten the space. Pots of green plants were strategically placed, adding life to the limited area. The furniture was basic and somewhat worn, but impeccably clean. A sofa with handmade cushions, a small dining table, improvised shelves neatly stacked with books. Ethan noted creative touches, fabric scraps repurposed into colorful pillows, recycled bottles used as vases, a wooden box reinvented as a coffee table. Your home is very welcoming, he said sincerely. Grace smiled, a hint of discreet pride in her eyes. We do what we can with what we have, she replied without a trace of self-pity. Please, have a seat. May I offer you some coffee? I just made some. That would be great, thank you. Emily perched on the edge of the sofa, watching Ethan curiously, lightly swinging her legs that barely touched the floor. While Grace went to the small kitchen, the girl leaned forward. Thank you for dancing with me yesterday, she said in a soft voice, as if sharing a secret. It was my pleasure, Ethan replied, genuinely touched by the child's sincerity. You dance very well. Emily giggled, covering her mouth with her hands, her cheeks flushing slightly. Grace returned with a tray holding 3 cups, 2 for adults and a smaller, colorful one clearly meant for Emily. She also brought some homemade cookies arranged on a simple but lovely plate. I want to thank you for what you did yesterday, said Grace, sitting next to her daughter. Emily told me how you stood up for her when the other kids were teasing her. Her eyes locked onto Ethan's with genuine gratitude. Not everyone would have cared. Anyone would have done the same, he replied, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the thanks. No, Grace disagreed gently. Not everyone would. It's easier to pretend not to see and just move on. A brief silence settled as they all sipped their drinks. Emily nibbled on a cookie, her eyes shifting between her mother and their visitor. Emily told me about your sneakers, Ethan ventured hesitantly, wanting to address the subject without sounding invasive. That must be tough, Grace nodded, showing no shame, only a quiet frankness. I work as a seamstress, she explained. I do small repairs, adjustments, and occasionally some new pieces when people order them. But it's getting harder these days. People prefer to buy new clothes rather than fix the old ones. A shirt rips, they buy another. A button falls off. Easier to throw it out. We live in a disposable era. There was resignation in her voice, but not bitterness. She simply acknowledged a reality she had learned to cope with. I still have some loyal customers, mostly neighbors. I do what I can with whatever comes my way. It's not much, but it keeps us going. The most important thing is that I got Emily a scholarship to Hope Elementary. I could never afford that education otherwise. Her eyes shone with determination as she continued. Her education is my biggest concern. I want her to have every opportunity to be able to choose her own path. That's why I work so hard, even when there's little work available. Emily, who had been quiet during the conversation, suddenly stood up. Do you want to see my drawings? She asked Ethan, with a confidence that contrasted with the shy girl he had met the day before. Of course I do, he replied, genuinely interested. The girl ran to a small table in the corner of the room and returned with a worn folder filled with papers. She sat between Ethan and her mother, opening the folder with reverent care. This is the park near the school, she explained, showing a colorful drawing of trees and a pond. I've never been there, but I can see it from the classroom window. She flipped the page. And this is the one from yesterday's party. Ethan smiled at her representation of the scene, himself and Emily dancing in the center, surrounded by colorful stars. She had perfectly captured the moment with an impressive sensitivity for someone so young. "You're very talented," he commented, genuinely impressed. Emily smiled, a blush of pride tinting her cheeks. Grace watched the scene with soft eyes, a mix of joy and careful hope. And at that moment, in that small but welcoming living room, amidst colorful drawings and the scent of fresh coffee, something important took shape. A genuine connection that transcended social differences and circumstances. A bridge built by the kindness of an unexpected gesture at a school fair. The days following Ethan's visit were filled with thoughts of Emily and her mother. During meetings in his city office, while discussing projects and contracts, his mind often drifted to the small house in Maple Creek. The image of Emily proudly and enthusiastically showing her drawings remained vivid in his memory. On Tuesday, Ethan left work early and drove to the nearest shopping center. He walked through the aisles with a purpose, stopping at various stores. In each one, he carefully selected items, not necessarily the most expensive or flashy, but those that were practical and durable. At the school supply store, he picked out a beautiful pink and lilac backpack decorated with silver butterflies and stars that glinted in the light. It wasn't just pretty but also sturdy, with several pockets and reinforced straps, the kind any girl would love to have. In the stationery section, he chose hardcover notebooks, professional colored pencils, markers, erasers, pencil sharpeners, and a roomy pencil case. At the uniform store, he bought 2 complete sets of Hope Elementary uniforms, navy blue skirts, white shirts, sweaters for colder days, and knee-high white socks. He checked the sizing chart 3 times, wanting to be sure they would fit Emily perfectly. His final stop was the shoe store, where he spent extra time examining each option closely. He finally picked out a pair of black sneakers, comfortable and durable, just right for Emily to run, jump, and play in without worry. They weren't the trendiest or most expensive, but they were exactly what a kid her age needed to feel the same as everyone else. While the clerk wrapped the sneakers, Ethan reflected on his actions. He wasn't doing this out of pity or to feel good about himself. There was something about the quiet resolve of that family, about the dignity with which they faced their difficulties, that deeply resonated with him. Emily deserved to worry only about being a kid, not about worn-out sneakers or inadequate supplies. The following Saturday, with all the items neatly organized in his car trunk, Ethan again headed to Maple Creek. The day was cloudier than before, with gray clouds suggesting later rain. The streets were quieter, with fewer children playing outside. Arriving at Emily's house, he felt an unexpected nervousness. What if Grace took his gesture the wrong way? What if she saw it as an intrusion, implying she couldn't provide for her daughter? He took a deep breath, reminding himself that his intentions were genuine. He had to trust that they'd be understood in the same spirit. He rang the doorbell, waiting while discreetly adjusting his shirt. This time, Grace opened the door, her face registering surprise first and then a warm smile of recognition. "Ethan, what a pleasant surprise," she said, stepping aside to let him in. "Please, come in." "Thank you, Grace," he replied as he entered. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. Emily just finished helping me tidy up and is reading in her room. She'll be thrilled to see you." The house felt even cozier than on the first visit. The aroma of something freshly baked filled the air, and Ethan noticed a small vase of wildflowers placed on the table. An old radio quietly played a gentle melody. "Emily!" Grace called out. "We have a visitor!" Light, quick footsteps came from down the hall, and soon Emily appeared, her face lighting up when she saw Ethan. She wore a simple dress, slightly too large, likely made by Grace using leftover fabric. "Hi, Ethan," she exclaimed, with none of the shyness from their very first meeting. "You really came back." "A promise is a promise," he said with a smile. "Besides, I brought some things I thought you might like." Emily glanced toward Grace, as though seeking permission to show excitement. Her mother gave a small nod. "They're in my car," Ethan continued. "May I bring them in?" "Sure," Grace replied, a note of caution in her voice. though she continued smiling kindly. Ethan stepped out briefly and returned carrying several bags. He set them down carefully on the living room rug, while Emily watched with wide eyes, and Grace wore an expression that was difficult to decipher: surprise, hesitation, and something deeper all at once. "Emily," Ethan began, kneeling so he was at her eye level, "remember when we first met at the school fair? You told me something important about your sneakers." The girl nodded, briefly lowering her eyes. "I've been thinking about that, and about how you draw so well, but maybe you don't have all the supplies you'd like." He started taking the items out of the bags, revealing them one by one. "So I brought some things for you." Emily's eyes grew even wider as she saw the school supplies, the uniforms, and finally the box with new sneakers. Her small hands touched each item reverently, as though she couldn't believe they were real. Grace stepped forward, her face showing a complex expression. There was gratitude, yes, but also a glint of pride in her eyes. "Ethan, this is very generous, but we can't—" "Please," he interrupted softly, now standing, looking her directly in the eyes. "It's not charity, it's admiration." The simplicity and sincerity of those words hung in the air between them. Grace studied his face, looking for any hint of condescension or pity, but found only genuineness. "I admire how you take care of Emily, how you maintain this house, and how you face hardships. I admire how she draws, how she smiles even when things are tough. This," he gestured at the gifts, "is just a way to show that admiration." Grace's eyes moistened slightly, but she kept her composure. After a moment that seemed to stretch infinitely, she nodded. "Thank you," she said simply, every syllable weighted with meaning. Emily, who had been testing the colored pencils on a piece of paper, suddenly stood up and, without warning, hugged Ethan around the waist, the highest point she could reach. It was a brief hug, but full of gratitude that words couldn't express. When she pulled away, her face shone with the brightest smile. "Can I try on the sneakers?" she asked, looking to her mother for approval. "Of course, honey," Grace replied with a soft smile. Emily sat on the floor, carefully opening the box as though it contained treasure. Her eyes sparkled at the sight of the new shoes, simple but perfect. She quickly removed her worn-out shoes and tried on the new ones, walking around the living room with exaggerated steps to feel them out. "They're so comfortable," she exclaimed. "Look, Mom, they're not too tight, not too big." Grace smiled, meeting Ethan's gaze with a new understanding. "They fit perfectly," she agreed. The rest of the afternoon was spent in pleasant conversation, shared tea, and Emily demonstrating how her new colored pencils brought her drawings to life even more vividly. When Ethan finally said his goodbyes, evening had set in outside, the first raindrops beginning to fall. At the door, while Emily tested out her new backpack in her room, Grace gently touched Ethan's arm. "Thank you," she repeated, this time with barely contained emotion in her voice. "Not just for the gifts, but for truly seeing Emily, for seeing both of us." Ethan nodded, fully understanding what she meant. "Thank you for having me today," he said sincerely. Grace smiled, and a smile that reached her eyes. "We should be the ones thanking you." And as he drove home through the rain, Ethan realized that in trying to help Emily and Grace, he had found something he hadn't known he was missing, a purpose beyond professional success, a connection that spoke to the truest part of who he was. A bond had begun. Simple as that, yet so profoundly significant. Monday morning arrived with a clear sky and birdsong, as though nature itself was celebrating alongside Emily the start of a new week. In her small bedroom, Grace carefully laid out Emily's new uniform on the bed. Perfect folds, the fabric still carrying that distinctive new clothes scent. "Emily, time to get ready for school," Grace called, stepping into the bathroom where her daughter was finishing brushing her teeth. The girl rinsed her mouth and ran to her room, her eyes lighting up at the sight of the uniform laid out on the colorful bedspread. She ran her fingers over the white shirt, marveling at the feeling of something new, cared for, and respectable. "It's so pretty, Mom," she whispered. Grace smiled, helping her get dressed. Every button was done up, every fold smoothed, every detail checked. When Emily finally laced up her new sneakers, she felt like she was wearing glass slippers, reminiscent of the Cinderella story her mother used to read to her. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning once in front of the small bedroom mirror. "Beautiful," Grace replied, her voice slightly trembling with emotion she tried to contain. "Perfect." In the kitchen, breakfast awaited: toast, scrambled eggs, and a glass of milk. Emily finished every bite, her stomach fluttering with excitement and nerves. Next to her plate sat the new pink and lilac backpack, already filled with hardcover notebooks, brand new colored pencils, markers, and all the supplies Ethan had brought. Grace brushed her daughter's hair with extra care that morning, pulling it into a neat ponytail with a ribbon that matched the backpack. Each gesture was a small celebration, a silent affirmation. Today would be different. "Ready?" Grace asked, helping Emily slip the backpack onto her shoulders. The girl nodded, a mixture of determination and apprehension in her eyes. Together, they walked to the school bus stop, the small hand holding the mother's firmly. When the yellow bus turned the corner, Grace knelt for one last hug. "Remember," she said softly, "you're wonderful, whether you have new things or not." Emily held her mother tightly, breathing in her familiar scent, a blend of simple soap and the ever-present fragrance of fabric from her sewing. "I love you, Mum." The bus stopped, its doors opening, and Emily climbed the steps. Through the window she waved at Grace, who remained at the curb until the vehicle disappeared around the next bend. On the bus, Emily felt the stares. They weren't the same as before, no mockery or pity, just curiosity, perhaps even a little admiration. An older girl smiled at her. A boy made room for her on his seat. Small kindnesses once reserved for other children, never for her. When the bus arrived at Hope Elementary, Emily took a deep breath before stepping off. The courtyard was as busy as ever, groups of kids chatting excitedly before the bell. For a moment, the old urge to shrink away, to find less visible corners, almost overcame her. But then she felt the comfort of her new sneakers, the reassuring weight of her pretty backpack, the dignity of a properly fitting uniform. For the first time, Emily walked across the courtyard without hiding, without staring at the ground, without trying to be invisible. She took small but confident steps, her head held slightly higher than usual. That's when she saw the group that had mocked her worn sneakers a few days before. 4 girls now watched her, exchanging glances. For a second, Emily's heart raced, the familiar fear threatening to return. But then, to her surprise, the girls began approaching. Their faces weren't sneering or whispering, they seemed uncertain, looking at their own feet. The tallest among them, a girl with blonde braids named Sophie, spoke first. "Hi, Emily," she began quietly. "Your uniform looks really nice." Emily blinked, surprised by the unexpected compliment. "And your backpack is really cool too," added another girl, Lily, staring at the silver butterflies decorating the bag. An awkward silence followed, until Sophie took a deep breath and looked Emily directly in the eyes. "I'm sorry we laughed at you the other day," she said, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "It was really mean." "We shouldn't have done that," Lily continued, nodding discreetly toward Emily's feet. "Your sneakers are really nice." Emily studied the girls, searching for any sign of falseness or a trap, but all she saw were sincere expressions of regret. She felt a warm sensation expand in her chest, no feeling of revenge or satisfaction at seeing them ashamed, but something gentler, forgiveness. "It's okay," she replied with a small smile, no bitterness in her voice. Then, summoning a courage she hadn't known she possessed, she added, "Do you want to play with me?" The girls' faces lit up with relief and genuine happiness. "Yes," Sophie exclaimed, "come with us." Lily extended her hand, an invitation that went beyond just recess. It was an offer of friendship, inclusion, belonging. Emily hesitated only a second before taking it. The bell rang, calling everyone to class, but that morning Emily didn't walk alone. She entered the building surrounded by her new friends, chatting about cartoons, favorite books, discovering shared interests that had been hidden behind invisible barriers of status and prejudice. In the classroom, the teacher immediately noticed the change, the timid yet present smile, the more confident posture, the hand that was raised for the first time to answer a question. During recess, Instead of sitting alone in a corner of the courtyard, Emily played hopscotch, jumped rope, and took part in circle games. She laughed, loudly, without fear or shame. She ran, her new sneakers tapping the rhythm on the playground, her voice mingling with the others in a harmony that felt natural, as though it had always been that way. For the first time, Emily no longer felt different, marked, or separate. She was just another kid, a child among children, with the fundamental right to simply belong. The hours flew by too quickly. When the final bell rang, signaling the end of classes, Emily packed her supplies into her new backpack, exchanging promises of fun the next day with her newfound friends. As she left through the school gates, she saw a surprise waiting. Leaning against a silver car, wearing a light blue shirt and dark pants, was Ethan. His eyes scanned the courtyard until they found Emily, and a broad smile lit his face when he saw her. Emily stopped for a moment, hardly believing it. Then, without a second thought, she ran toward him, her backpack bouncing on her shoulders, her new sneakers pounding on the asphalt, her heart brimming with a happiness she had only ever experienced in her most colorful drawings. "Ethan!" she exclaimed, stopping in front of him, slightly out of breath. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied simply. "I wanted to know how your day went." Emily grinned, and in that smile was the entire story of her transformative day, the apologies, the new friendships, the games, the laughter. Then, in a burst of pure gratitude, she hugged Ethan around the waist, looking up with shining eyes. "Thank you for taking care of me," she said softly but firmly, simple words carrying the weight of a whole world of difference. And as Ethan helped her get into the car to drive her home, Emily knew something fundamental had changed. It wasn't just the new sneakers or the pretty backpack. It was the sense of worth, of dignity, of deserving the same respect and opportunities as any other child. For the first time in her young life, Emily had experienced what it was like to be simply equal to the other kids. The ride home was filled with Emily's excited chatter. She told Ethan every detail of her day, how she'd been invited to play during recess, how the other kids had admired her new things, how one girl had even shared her cookies. Ethan listened attentively, occasionally asking questions, laughing along with her. Through the corner of his eye, he watched how she gestured excitedly, how she grew more expressive by the minute, a subtle but deep transformation from the shy girl he had met only days before. "Sophie invited me to her birthday party next month." Emily nearly bounced in her seat. "She's having a unicorn-themed party, and there's going to be chocolate strawberry cake, which is my favorite. And she said I can bring my new colored pencils so we can draw together, because she likes to draw too, but doesn't have pencils as nice as mine," and she went on without stopping for breath, while Ethan grinned, charmed by her enthusiasm. The childhood world, with its quick friendships and simple joys, held a purity he had long forgotten. When they reached the cobblestone street where Emily lived, Ethan slowed the car, looking for a spot to park. The girl finally paused her excited monologue, gazing out the window with growing anticipation. "Mum's probably home from work by now," she commented. "I can't wait to tell her everything." Ethan parked and helped Emily out, carrying her backpack while she hopped excitedly beside him toward the house. Before they could even knock, the door opened, revealing Grace with a concerned expression that quickly turned into relief and then surprise upon seeing them together. "Emily, Ethan," she exclaimed. "I was worried when you didn't come home at the usual time, sweetheart." "Sorry for not letting you know," Ethan said quickly. "I picked Emily up from school and we lost track of time talking." Grace smiled, opening the door wider for them to enter. "That's all right. Please, come in." Emily barely crossed the threshold before she started talking. "Mom, I had the best day of my life," she announced, her eyes glowing with excitement. "You should have seen it. Everyone looked at me when I arrived, but it wasn't mean looks like before. It was more like, wow." Grace gave Ethan a grateful smile before focusing all her attention on her daughter. "Tell me everything, sweetheart." The three of them settled in the small living room. Emily sat between her mother and Ethan on the sofa, still in her pristine uniform, her feet swinging above the floor in her new sneakers. "Sophie, the girl who used to tease me about my old shoes. She apologized today, and Lily too. They said my new sneakers are pretty and my backpack too. Then they asked me to play with them. Grace listened intently, her fingers gently stroking Emily's hair, while Ethan watched the scene with a warm feeling in his chest. We played tag at recess, and I ran so fast in my new shoes that nobody could catch me. Then we made a drawing together, and the teacher put mine on the classroom wall because it was the best one, and everyone said I draw really well. Emily's excitement was contagious. Her voice rose and fell in waves of emotion. Grace smiled, absorbing every word, every excited expression on her daughter's face, as if she wanted to record the moment forever. At lunchtime, Emily went on, I sat with the girls. Before, I always ate alone, but not today. Sophie shared her cookies with me, and Lily gave me a piece of her apple, and we talked about cartoons and books and our favorite colors. Her narration continued, detailing every moment, from how confident she felt answering a hard math question to how the other kids included her in a jump rope game during second recess. She spoke without pausing, reliving each instant with the intensity only a child can muster. Grace and Ethan occasionally exchanged glances above Emily's head, glances that acknowledged the deep significance of this seemingly ordinary day. Finally, Emily paused, taking a deep breath as though she needed to catch up on oxygen after so many words. She looked at her mother with a more serene expression, almost reflective, unusual for a child so young. "Mom?" she asked in a softer voice. "Yes, my love." Emily took her mother's hands in her own small ones, her gesture intensely expressive. "Today I shared cookies with the other girls, and nobody laughed at me." The simplicity of the statement contrasted with the depth of the feeling behind it. It wasn't just about playing or sharing snacks, it was about belonging, acceptance, dignity, concepts Emily might not know by name, but felt with her whole heart. Grace swallowed hard, her eyes welling up with tears that glistened but did not fall. She pulled her daughter into a tight hug, her chin resting on the child's soft hair, her body trembling slightly with contained emotion. "I'm so happy for you, my love," she whispered. So happy. When she finally let go, Grace was smiling through unshed tears, her eyes reflecting all the room's light, all the love she felt for her daughter, all the gratitude for the day Emily had experienced. Ethan watched quietly, feeling both included in the moment and like a privileged witness to something deeply intimate. The transformation he observed was not only in Emily's life, but also in Grace's, a mother watching her daughter finally taste a simple joy that every child deserves. Afternoon wore on. Golden rays from the setting sun entered through the simple curtains, creating a warm glow around mother and daughter still huddled on the modest sofa, which, in that moment, contained all the happiness in the world. Emily pulled away from her mother's embrace, her shining eyes meeting Ethan's. Without speaking, she reached out her arm to include him in the circle, a simple gesture that spoke louder than 1,000 words. And so the three of them remained, united not by blood but by something just as strong, a connection born of kindness, respect, and a recognition of each person's inherent dignity, no matter how small, no matter how seemingly insignificant in the eyes of the world. The following days brought a new routine for Emily. She no longer walked alone through the hallways or hid during breaks. Now she had friends to talk with, laugh with, and play with. At home, she spent hours drawing with her new colored pencils, creating vibrant worlds filled with smiling children, rainbows, and fantastic animals. Grace watched this transformation with a mix of joy and silent gratitude, noticing how Emily now hummed while drawing, ate with more appetite, and slept more peacefully. Ethan had also become part of this new routine, never intrusive or overwhelming, but present enough to make a difference. Sometimes he would pick Emily up from school and drive her home. Other times he would stop by on weekends with a new book or more drawing supplies, always respectful of Grace's boundaries, always careful that his gestures came across as genuine care, never as charity. One particularly sunny Saturday, Ethan arrived at Emily's house with a different idea. The sky was a deep, clear blue without a single cloud, and a gentle breeze rustled the curtains in the small living room where Emily was drawing, fully absorbed in her newest creation. "Good morning," Ethan greeted as he entered, welcomed by Grace with a warm smile that was becoming ever more natural. "Ethan!" Emily exclaimed, dropping her pencils immediately to run over. The quick hug she gave him had become a regular ritual. "Look what I'm drawing. It's an enchanted forest filled with fairies and elves. That's me, this is Mom, and that's you." Ethan crouched down to examine the colorful drawing, in which 3 figures held hands amid magical creatures and oversized trees. "That's amazing, Emily," he praised sincerely. "You get better every day." The girl beamed, proud, before returning to her little desk. "Coffee, Ethan," Grace offered, already heading to the kitchen. "Only if it's no trouble," he replied, following her. Once they were alone enough, he lowered his voice. "Actually, I came to ask if I could take Emily on an outing today. It's the perfect day to visit Riverside Park." Grace hesitated for a moment, her eyes searching Ethan's. "It's the largest park in the city," he continued. "There are lakes, fountains, playgrounds. I thought she might enjoy spending a few hours there." A gentle smile formed on Grace's lips. "She's never been to a park like that," she said softly. "I've always wanted to take her, but between work and daily expenses..." She let the sentence trail off, no need to elaborate. "So it'll be her first time?" Ethan asked, feeling a pang in his chest as he thought about all the simple experiences Emily had never had. Grace nodded. "She'll love it. She has so much energy. Sometimes I feel sad I can't give her more space to run and play freely. Would you mind if I took her today? I promised to bring her back before dinner." Grace looked through the kitchen door at her daughter, who now hummed softly as she colored, intensely focused. "That would be wonderful for her," she finally responded. Then, with a playful smile, she added, "But prepare yourself for a lot of pent-up energy being released all at once." When Emily heard about the trip, her reaction was exactly what one would expect. Jumps of joy, a barrage of questions, and a whirlwind of activity. Grace helped her change clothes, opting for a simple but comfortable dress and sneakers. Her new ones, of course, which by now felt like a lucky charm. "Take your hat to protect from the sun," Grace advised, adjusting a wide-brimmed hat on her daughter's head. "And obey Ethan, all right? Stay where he can see you." "Yes, Mom," Emily promised, barely able to stand still as her mother applied sunscreen to her face and arms. "And Ethan," Grace turned to him with a serious expression that quickly morphed into a smile. "Have fun too. You deserve it." The drive to Riverside Park was filled with Emily's excited voice, asking what they would see, sharing her expectations, inventing stories about the adventures they might have. Ethan answered patiently and enthusiastically, charmed by her ability to find joy in the simple promise of something new. When they finally passed through the park's large iron gates, Emily's reaction exceeded all expectations. Her eyes went wide as if trying to take in all that green space at once. Her mouth formed a small O of wonder. Then, as though a dam had burst, she let out a cry of pure delight. "It's huge," she exclaimed, spinning in circles to see in every direction. "Look at all the trees and grass and flowers. Is that a lake way over there? And is that a fountain, Ethan? Look how many kids are playing." Ethan smiled, feeling a wave of emotion at witnessing such pure, uncomplicated happiness. He thought about his own privileged childhood, the countless trips to parks, zoos and museums, experiences he had considered normal, guaranteed, sometimes even dull. And here was Emily, overflowing with joy at a simple trip to the park for the first time. "Where do you want to start?" he asked, holding out his hand. Emily looked around, apparently overwhelmed by the wonders. "Can we go to the fountain first?" she finally asked, pointing to the large circular structure in the park's center where water jets danced to distant music. "Sure thing." She took off running, practically dragging Ethan along, her boundless energy contagious. He followed with a laugh. The fountain was impressive, wide and circular, with jets of varying heights moving in coordinated patterns, creating a spectacle of water and light under the bright sun. Children ran around it, some daring to touch the water at the lower arcs, others simply watching in fascination. Emily stopped a few feet away, suddenly shy before the grand display. Ethan crouched beside her. "How you can go closer," he encouraged gently. "It's okay to touch the water." The girl looked at him uncertainly. "Really? Really? See, other kids are doing it too. That was all Emily needed. She took tentative steps forward, then bolder ones, until she reached the fountain's edge. She stretched out a trembling hand and finally touched the cool water spraying in sparkling droplets. "It's cold," she giggled, dipping both hands now, letting the water flow between her small fingers. "And so clear, you can see the bottom," Ethan observed, amazed at children's ability to find wonder in the simplest things. For Emily, this wasn't just water in a fountain, it was a discovery, an adventure, a brand new experience to savor with all her senses. They spent almost half an hour there, Emily exploring every part of the fountain, trying to predict the jet's movements, laughing when an unexpected spurt sprayed bright drops on her dress. Ethan took some photos with his phone, wanting to capture these moments of pure joy to share with Grace later. When Emily finally had her fill of the water, another attraction had already caught her eye. "Can we go to that playground now?" she asked, pointing to a colorful play area in the distance, filled with climbing structures, slides, and swings. "Let's go," Ethan agreed, once again following the energetic small steps. The playground was a sprawling complex, designed for different age groups, with separate areas for younger and older kids. Emily paused at the entrance, her eyes scanning every detail as though she didn't know where to start. "I want to try the big slide," she decided, pointing to a spiral-shaped structure that even looked intimidating to Ethan. "Are you sure? It's pretty tall." "I'm sure," she replied, brimming with confidence that clashed with her usual shyness. "Will you watch me from the bottom?" "Of course. I'll be right here." Emily ran to the ladder leading to the top of the slide. Ethan watched her climb each rung determinedly, pausing occasionally to catch her breath, but never giving up. When she finally reached the top, she looked down, searching for Ethan, who waved encouragingly. There was a moment of hesitation, the height suddenly seeming much greater from up there. But then Emily took a deep breath, sat at the slide's entrance, and let out a squeal that was half fear, half excitement, as she launched herself into the spiraling descent. Ethan tracked her progress, his own heart pounding as she spun faster with every turn. Then she emerged at the bottom, hair disheveled, cheeks flushed, eyes shining with adrenaline and triumph. "I did it," she yelled, running up to Ethan. "Did you see? Was I super fast?" "I sure did. You were super brave and very fast," he praised, genuinely impressed by her courage. What followed was a marathon of activities. Emily wanted to try every swing, every seesaw, every climbing frame. She ran from one structure to another, her energy seemingly endless, while Ethan did his best to keep up, occasionally joining the fun when invited. "Push me higher," she'd call out on the swing, laughing as she went higher and higher into the sky. "Look, I'm balancing," she'd announce proudly, walking across a suspended rope bridge. "I made it to the top," she'd declare from the summit of a climbing wall. Morning gave way to afternoon before they realized it. Eventually, Ethan noticed signs that Emily's energy was finally waning, her steps slowing, her breathing heavier between activities. "How about we take a break for lunch?" he suggested, showing her the small cooler bag he had brought. "I've got sandwiches, juice, and some fruit." Emily nodded, suddenly aware that she was hungry. They found a bench under the generous shade of an old oak tree overlooking a lake where ducks calmly swam. Ethan took out neatly wrapped sandwiches, a bottle of fresh juice, and sliced apples. "Thank you," Emily said, taking her sandwich and biting into it eagerly. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence, watching the ducks, feeling the light breeze rustle the leaves overhead, and observing the passing families enjoying the perfect day. "I've never been anywhere like this," Emily finally commented, her voice small but full of awe as she gazed across the park's greenery. Ethan felt a pang in his heart. A simple park visit, something so many children took for granted, was all for Emily, a monumental, extraordinary experience. "From now on, you can come whenever you want," he replied softly but firmly, a silent promise that days like this wouldn't just be exceptions but a regular possibility in her life. Emily looked at him, her face lighting up with a smile that still held a trace of her earlier flush from running around. "Really? We can come back another day?" "Sure, and we can explore other parts of the park." There's a botanical garden on the other side with all kinds of butterflies and flowers. In the summer, they even set up a small carousel near the lake. Emily's eyes shone at the possibilities. Then, as she munched on an apple slice, her expression turned thoughtful, almost adult in its seriousness. "Ethan," she started hesitantly, "can I tell you something?" "Anything, Emily." The girl fiddled with the hem of her dress for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I've never met my dad," she said at last, her voice low but clear. "My mum takes care of me by herself. We don't have much, but she really loves me." Those simple words, spoken with the direct sincerity of a child, hung between them. There was no self-pity in her voice, only the acceptance of a reality she understood as normal. Ethan looked at her, resisting the urge to offer empty consolations or grand promises. Instead, he did what felt most important at that moment. He listened, just listened, fully, respecting the trust she placed in him by sharing something so personal. And in that attentive silence, Ethan understood everything. He understood the immense value of small acts of kindness in Emily's life. He understood the quiet strength of Grace, raising a daughter alone and still managing to keep her so sweet and resilient. He understood that real poverty wasn't about lacking material resources, but lacking love, something Emily clearly had in abundance. "Your mom is amazing," he said finally, carefully choosing each word. "And so are you." Emily smiled, seeming content with his simple response. She finished her juice and glanced again at the playground, renewed energy flickering in her eyes after their rest. "Can I play a little bit more before we go?" "Of course you can." And off she ran again to explore, to discover, while Ethan watched her with a new understanding and a new resolve forming in his heart. The afternoon continued, sun-drenched and perfect, as a little girl experienced the simple freedom of just being a kid in a park, running on the grass, touching the fountain water, climbing slides, and a young man discovered the profound privilege of being part of her journey, if only for a little while. The weeks following the park outing brought a new routine for the little family and for Ethan. Weekends became highly anticipated moments for Emily, who now knew there would always be a new adventure, another park to visit, a children's museum to explore, a movie outing followed by ice cream. Initially hesitant, Grace had grown accustomed to Ethan's regular presence in their lives, recognizing how much it meant for her daughter to have experiences she herself couldn't provide alone. But life rarely follows the paths we plan. On an otherwise ordinary Wednesday, Grace woke up feeling strangely tired. She attributed it to overwork. She had taken on more sewing commissions to make the most of the approaching holiday season. She ignored a mild dizziness upon getting up and the persistent headache, focusing instead on preparing Emily's breakfast and getting her ready for school. "Mom, are you okay?" Emily asked during breakfast, her observant eyes noticing her mother's pale face. "Just a little tired, sweetheart," Grace answered with a forced smile. "Nothing a good cup of coffee won't fix." But the coffee remained untouched, her stomach protesting at its mere smell. Even so, she got up resolutely, helped Emily finish getting ready, and accompanied her to the school bus stop as she did every morning. "Have a good day, my love," she said, hugging her daughter tightly before watching her climb onto the yellow bus. Emily waved from the window as the vehicle pulled away, a small crease of worry forming between her brows upon noticing how her mother leaned on the lamppost for support. Back in the quiet house, Grace tried to focus on work. She had a party dress to finish by the end of the week, and several pairs of pants to adjust. She sat at her sewing machine, determined to ignore the growing discomfort. The hours ticked by slowly, each minute feeling more difficult than the last. Her headache worsened, and now she felt chills despite it not being particularly cold. Around noon, she stood to make some tea, hoping it might help. That's when the room began spinning around her. Grace tried to steady herself on the edge of the table, but her legs gave out. Her last conscious thought as her vision darkened was worry. Who would pick Emily up from school? Hours later, the school bus halted at the familiar corner. Emily hopped off enthusiastically, her backpack filled with new drawings to show her mom. She hurried along the sidewalk, excited to share the praise she'd received from her teacher for a writing assignment about the park trip. Approaching the house, she noticed the door was unlocked. unusual since Grace always stressed the importance of keeping it locked. Emily walked in hesitantly, calling for her mother. "Mom, I'm home." Silence. She moved further into the small living room, leaving her backpack on the sofa. "Mom, where are you?" That's when she saw her. Grace was lying on the kitchen floor, pale and unresponsive, a broken glass beside her, water spilled across the tile. "Mom!" Emily cried, rushing over. "Mom, wake up!" She shook her mother's shoulder gently, then more urgently, panic rising as each second passed without a response. She touched Grace's face. It was hot, far too hot. "Mom, please," she whimpered, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "Please wake up." But Grace remained unconscious, her shallow breathing the only sign that she was still alive. Emily froze for a moment, fear threatening to consume her. Then, as if guided by some unseen strength, she remembered the instructions her mother often repeated. "If there's ever an emergency and I can't help, call 911. With shaking hands, she grabbed the phone from the living room table. She dialed 911, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of her chest. 911, what's your emergency?" a calm voice answered. My mom," Emily stammered, words tangled with sobs. "She fell. She won't wake up. You have to help." "Stay calm, honey," the operator said gently but firmly. "What's your name?" "Emily." "How old are you, Emily?" I'm little," she replied, vaguely recalling she shouldn't be home alone. "It's okay, Emily. You're being very brave. Can you tell me where you live?" With difficulty, Emily managed to provide the address, repeating it exactly as her mother had taught her. "Well done, Emily. We're sending an ambulance right now. Is your mom breathing?" "Yes," Emily answered after quickly checking in the kitchen, "but she's really hot. And she won't wake up." "The ambulance is on its way. Can you stay on the line with me until they arrive?" "Yes, but..." Emily hesitated, a new thought popping up. "Can I call someone else? Ethan. He always helps us." The operator paused briefly. "Who's Ethan, dear?" He's my mom's friend, and mine too. He'll know what to do." "Of course, Emily. If you have his number, you can hang up to call him. Then please stay with your mother, okay? The ambulance will be there soon." "Okay." Emily hung up and immediately searched for her mother's cell phone, finding it in Grace's purse near the sewing machine. With trembling fingers, she found Ethan's name in the recent contacts and pressed call. Ethan was in an important meeting when his phone vibrated. Normally, he would have ignored it, but seeing Grace's name on the screen gave him an inexplicable urge to answer. "Excuse me," he murmured to the executives at the table, standing quickly. "I have to take this call." In the hallway outside the meeting room, he answered, "Grace, everything okay?" "Ethan!" The child's panicked voice caught him completely off guard. "It's Emily! My mom fell! She won't wake up! You have to come now!" Ethan's heart instantly raced. "Emily, calm down. Where are you?" "At home. Mom's on the kitchen floor." "I already called 911, but I'm scared." "You did exactly the right thing, Emily," he said, already sprinting toward the elevator. "I'm on my way there right now. Is the ambulance coming?" "Yes, the lady on the phone said they already sent it." "Good. Emily, stay by your mom's side. Check if she's breathing, okay? I'll be there as fast as I can. Please hurry," she begged, her voice cracking. "I'm so scared." "I know, sweetheart. You're being very brave. I'll be there in a few minutes." Ethan hung up, rushing to the parking lot, his heart pounding against his chest. The drive that usually took 20 minutes was done in less than 15, with Ethan ignoring speed limits and nearly running red lights. When he finally arrived at Grace and Emily's street, an ambulance was already parked in front of the house, lights flashing silently. He parked haphazardly and dashed inside, finding the door open. In the kitchen, 2 paramedics were attending to Grace, who was now on a stretcher. Emily was against the opposite wall, hugging herself, wide-eyed and focused on her mother's still form. "Emily!" Ethan called. She turned, and upon seeing him, sprinted toward him as if her life depended on it. Ethan scooped her into his arms, feeling her small body trembling against his chest. "You came," she sobbed, clinging to him. "Of course I came," he replied, holding her securely while he approached the paramedics. "How is she?" he asked one of them. "High fever, low blood pressure, severe dehydration," the paramedic said, not stopping her work. "Are you the father?" she asked, briefly glancing at Emily in his arms. "No, Ethan hesitated, realizing there was no simple word to describe his role in their family. "I'm a close friend. The girl called me." "All right, we're taking her to Central Hospital right now. Looks like pneumonia, but we'll need tests to confirm. Can I go with her? The girl has no one else." The paramedic nodded. "You can follow us in your car. Unless you prefer the child ride with us?" Ethan glanced at Emily, who clung to him like she feared being separated. "I think it's best if she comes with me. We'll be right behind you." Minutes later, the ambulance sped off, sirens blaring. Ethan followed in his car with Emily in the back seat, buckled up but leaning forward as though trying to close the distance to the ambulance carrying her mom. "Is Mom going to be okay?" she asked quietly, breaking the tense silence. Ethan wanted to promise yes, wanted to say everything would be fine, but he couldn't lie to her. "The doctors will do everything they can, Emily. Your mom is strong. We'll be right there with her." At the hospital, the organized chaos of the ER swallowed them up. Grace was taken in immediately, while Ethan and Emily were directed to a waiting area with forms to fill out and questions to answer. "Do you know if she has any insurance?" asked the receptionist. Ethan thought for a moment. Grace likely didn't. Her financial situation probably wouldn't allow such a luxury. "I'm not sure," he said. "But please don't worry about that now. I'll cover whatever expenses come up." He filled out the forms with what information he knew. Emily, sitting next to him, her small face pale with worry. When he finished, he knelt down to her level. "Are you hungry? Thirsty? I can get you something at the cafeteria." Emily shook her head. "I just want my mom," she whispered. Ethan nodded, sitting beside her and wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. "I know, sweetheart. We'll wait here together, okay?" The hours dragged on. By early evening, a doctor finally appeared, calling for relatives of Grace Miller. Ethan stood, holding Emily's hand. "How is she, doctor?" The physician, a middle-aged man with dark circles under his eyes, looked at them seriously but not alarmingly. "Severe bacterial pneumonia, complicated by exhaustion and dehydration. She was probably sick for days, ignoring the symptoms. Will she be okay?" Emily asked in a voice so low it was almost inaudible. The doctor knelt down, looking directly at the child. "Your mom needs to stay in the hospital for a few days to get IV antibiotics and plenty of rest. But yes, she will be fine." The relief was so great that Ethan felt his legs go weak. He squeezed Emily's hand and she let out a small sob of relief. "Can we see her?" Ethan asked. "She's sleeping now because of the medication, but you can go in for a few minutes. Then I suggest you take the child home to rest. Her mom probably won't wake up until tomorrow." They were led through white, sterile corridors to a room where Grace was resting, hooked up to monitors and an IV drip. She looked small and fragile against the hospital linens, but her breathing was steadier, and color was beginning to return to her face. Emily approached tentatively, glancing back at Ethan as if asking permission. He nodded encouragingly. "You can hold her hand, Emily. She'll like knowing you're here, even if she's asleep." The girl gently touched her mother's hand, her tiny fingers wrapping around Grace's. "Mom," she whispered, "I did what you taught me to do. I called for help. Ethan's here with me. We're going to take care of you now." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He watched Emily for a moment, admiring her courage and maturity in such a scary situation. Then, gently, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "We need to let your mom rest now. We can come back first thing tomorrow." Emily reluctantly let go of Grace's hand. "Promise we'll come back?" "I promise. First thing in the morning." They left the room quietly, but in the corridor Emily stopped, looking at Ethan with a new concern. "Where am I going to sleep tonight? I can't stay home alone." Ethan hadn't considered that, but the answer came naturally. "You'll stay with me, of course. I have a guest room we can fix up for you. And tomorrow, we'll pick up some of your things from home before we visit your mum. How does that sound?" Emily nodded, relief evident on her tired face. Before leaving the hospital, Ethan stopped by the administration desk to ensure Grace would get the best care possible, leaving his credit card to cover all expenses. He also spoke with the doctors, making sure he would be informed of any changes in her condition overnight. On the way to his apartment, he stopped at a convenience store to buy some basic items for Emily: a toothbrush, pajamas, a change of clothes. "Let's grab some food too," he said, looking at her in the rearview mirror. "What would you like for dinner?" "I'm not really hungry," the girl answered, her gaze lost in the darkness outside the window. "I understand, but you need to eat something. How about pasta? Or maybe a sandwich?" After a moment of hesitation, Emily replied, "Mac and cheese. Mom always makes it when I'm sad." "Mac and cheese it is," Ethan agreed, pulling into a restaurant he knew. Later that night, in Ethan's large but rarely used apartment, he prepared the guest room for Emily. He placed clean towels in the adjacent bathroom, made sure there was a glass of water on the bedside table, and opened the window slightly for fresh air. Emily ate in silence, her eyes still reflecting the fear and worry of the day. After a bath, she wore the new pajamas Ethan had bought, light pink with small stars, and looked even smaller, more vulnerable. "Are you sure Mom's going to be okay?" she asked, as Ethan helped her settle into the oversized bed. "I'm sure," he replied firmly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The doctors are taking very good care of her. Tomorrow, when we visit, she'll probably be awake and much better." Emily nodded, wanting to believe him. She pulled the blanket up to her chin, her eyes fixed on the unfamiliar ceiling. "Thanks for coming when I called," she said softly. "I was so scared when I saw Mom on the floor." "You were very brave, Emily. You did exactly what you should, calling 911, then me. You saved your mom today." A small smile appeared on the girl's face. "Really?" "Absolutely." Emily settled more comfortably, exhaustion finally winning over anxiety. "Ethan," she asked sleepily, "will you stay here until I fall asleep?" "Of course," he replied, tucking the blanket around her. "And if you need anything during the night, I'll be right next door. Just call me." "Okay," she murmured, her eyes already closing. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Emily." Ethan remained seated beside her, watching as she drifted into sleep. When he was sure she was deeply asleep, he rose quietly. He paused at the door, reflecting on how in just a few hours his life had been completely upended. That night, while the city slept, Ethan made calls, rearranging commitments, canceling meetings. Emily and Grace were now his top priority, and for the first time in a long while, he felt he was exactly where he needed to be, caring for someone who needed him, not just as a provider, but as a protector, a safe harbor. The responsibility was daunting, but also strangely comforting. In the room next door, a little girl slept, trusting him to keep her world safe while her mother could not. It was a silent promise Ethan made to himself. He wouldn't fail them, not now, not ever. Days in the hospital turned into a week of IV antibiotics, of kind nurses changing sheets and checking vitals, of doctors taking notes on clipboards and discussing Grace's improvement. A week of Emily splitting her time between school and daily visits to her mother, always accompanied by Ethan, who had rearranged his entire schedule to be there whenever needed. Grace improved each day, her color returned, the fever subsided, and her breathing became easier. Yet the doctors insisted she needed total rest, something that made her visibly uneasy. "I need to get back to work," she often said, staring out the hospital window as though she could see the pile of sewing orders accumulating at home. "I have deadlines." "Work can wait," Ethan would reply with gentle firmness. "Your health comes first. Emily needs her mom healthy." That reasoning always worked. Grace would lean back into her pillows, nodding in silence, but her eyes still revealed the constant worry of someone who doesn't have the luxury to stop working. Finally, on a clear, mild morning, the news they'd been waiting for arrived. Grace was ready to be discharged. She could continue treatment at home as long as she strictly followed medical recommendations: rest, proper medication schedule, balanced meals, and absolutely no work for at least 2 more weeks. 2 weeks? Grace repeated, looking at the doctor as if he'd suggested something impossible. "Doctor, I can't stay off work that long. I'm a freelance seamstress." If I don't work, I don't earn. The doctor, an older man with gentle eyes behind his glasses, glanced at the mother and daughter, the latter waiting anxiously alongside Ethan. Ms. Miller, you had severe pneumonia complicated by chronic exhaustion. Your body needs this time to fully recover. If you return to work too soon, you risk a relapse, which could mean more weeks in the hospital, not just 2 at home. Grace lowered her gaze, the financial reality weighing heavily on her shoulders, even in this moment of relief at finally going home. We'll figure it out, Ethan intervened, his voice calm yet decisive. What's important now is your full recovery, Grace. Everything else we can handle together. The trip home was quiet but charged with emotions. Relief, worry, gratitude, uncertainty. In the back seat of Ethan's car, Emily held her mother's hand as though afraid to let go, in case she disappeared again. The small house had never seemed so welcoming as it did that day. Thanks to Ethan and Emily's efforts, it was clean and organized, with fresh flowers on the living room table and the bed neatly made with clean sheets. Even the plants had been watered regularly. Did you both do all this? Grace asked, her voice emotional, as Ethan helped her onto the sofa. Emily was a huge help, he answered, smiling at the girl who hurried to bring a blanket for her mother. She insisted everything be perfect for when you got back. I brought your favorite slippers, Mom, Emily said, carefully placing them on her mother's feet. And I put your book here, and a glass of water and the TV remote. Grace smiled, tears threatening to well up as she took in her daughter's thoughtfulness. You really thought of everything, didn't you? Ethan helped, Emily said, gazing admiringly at the man who had become such an important presence in their lives in such a short time. He said we have to take really good care of you now. Grace looked at Ethan, gratitude passing between them in silence. So much to say, so many thanks she could never properly put into words. The days that followed established a new routine. Ethan hired a home nurse to look after Grace during the day while Emily was at school. In the late afternoon, he dropped by to see how they were doing, often bringing dinner or needed supplies. Grace gradually regained her strength, though her worries about unpaid work and mounting bills were ever present in her eyes. One particularly pleasant afternoon, about 10 days after she'd come home, Grace sat on the small porch, enjoying the fresh air and watching Emily play in the front yard. The girl was chasing a butterfly, laughing as the colorful insect easily eluded her. Ethan arrived, carrying a grocery bag and a large manila envelope under his arm. He greeted them both with the warm smile that had become so familiar. How are you feeling today? He asked Grace, taking a seat in the chair beside hers. Much better, she replied, meaning it. Her face had regained its color completely, and her breathing no longer carried the telltale rasp of pneumonia. I think I'll be able to work again next week. Ethan nodded, but his expression suggested there was more on his mind. He waited until Emily, tired of chasing the butterfly, went inside to grab her drawing materials. Grace, he began, choosing his words carefully. There's something I'd like to discuss with you. She straightened a bit, her expression turning serious. It's about the hospital bills, right? I know it must be a lot, and I promise to pay every cent back as soon as I'm working again. It might take a while, but— No, Ethan gently interrupted. That's not it. The medical expenses are already taken care of. Don't worry about them. Grace frowned slightly. How? My basic insurance wouldn't cover half of what was needed. I took care of it, he said simply. Before she could protest, he continued, and I don't want to hear about reimbursements. I was happy to help. Grace opened her mouth to argue, but something in Ethan's determined gaze made her stop. After a moment, she simply nodded, the words thank you feeling inadequate for his kindness. Actually, Ethan went on, I want to talk about the future, about Emily. At this, Grace's attention sharpened instantly, as it always did when her daughter was the topic. What about her? Ethan chose his next words with care. Over the past few weeks, I've gotten to know you both better. I've seen how hard you work, how much you do to give Emily the best you can, and I've also seen her incredible potential, her intelligence, her sensitivity, her artistic talent. Grace smiled, maternal pride evident in her eyes. She is special, she agreed. I've known that since she was a baby. A contemplative silence fell, broken only by the distant sounds of kids playing in another yard. Grace gazed at the horizon, where the sun was slowly beginning to set, painting the sky in orange tones. I never had the chance to study, she said at last, her voice quiet but clear. I had to start working early to help my own mother. I do what I can with my sewing, but I want so much more for Emily. Her confession was simple in words but profound in meaning, hanging in the air around them. Ethan could feel the weight of Grace's hopes, the enormous responsibility she'd carried alone for years. Gently, he reached out and took her hand, a gesture of solidarity and understanding. From now on, you don't need to worry about that. I'll make sure Emily has the education she needs. Grace turned to him, confusion and surprise on her face. What do you mean, Ethan? I'm saying I want to help. I want to guarantee Emily has access to the best education possible, from her current school to college, if she wants. No worries about tuition, supplies, uniforms, none of it. Grace seemed speechless, tears already forming in her eyes as they reflected the setting sun. But why? She finally managed. Why would you do that for us? Ethan thought for a moment, the answer both complex and simple. Because you both matter to me, he replied sincerely. Because Emily deserves every opportunity the world has to offer. And because I'm in a position to help, and I want to. At that moment, Emily returned to the porch with a sketch pad and her favorite colored pencils. Oblivious to the intense conversation she'd just interrupted, she settled on the wooden floor and began to draw, fully absorbed in her little world of colors and shapes. Grace and Ethan watched her in silence for a few moments, both deeply moved for reasons Emily, in her innocence, couldn't yet fully grasp. Emily sat on the floor, drawing a picture of a house with large windows and a garden full of flowers. Each line was careful, each color chosen with special attention. The tip of her tongue peeked out of the corner of her mouth, a sign of her intense concentration. Ethan settled beside her, watching affectionately as the drawing took shape under her small, skillful fingers. "So you really love drawing, huh?" he asked quietly. She nodded, smiling without taking her eyes off the paper, adding another flower to the colorful garden. Grace observed them from her chair, her heart overflowing with contradictory emotions. Gratitude, relief, a twinge of wounded pride at not being able to provide all this on her own, but above all, a new hope for the future unfolding before her. Then, Ethan took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "Emily, there's something very important I want you to know. From now on, I'm going to take care of your education, all the way until college, if that's what you want. You'll have everything you need to learn and grow." The girl finally looked up from her drawing, her pencil hovering mid-air. Her large, expressive eyes shone with a mix of surprise and, was it hope? "Really, Ethan?" she asked, her small voice laden with controlled emotion. "Really?" he affirmed, the seriousness of his promise evident in his gaze. "You'll never again feel different from the other kids. You'll study without worries, and you'll have everything you need. Your mum can breathe a bit easier." Emily glanced quickly at her mother, as if seeking confirmation. Grace, tears silently rolling down her cheeks, nodded with a trembling smile. What happened next was pure, instinctive emotion. Emily dropped the pencil she'd been holding, momentarily forgetting her drawing, and leapt into Ethan's arms, her small arms barely reaching around his neck. "Thank you, Ethan. Thank you so much," she whispered against his shoulder, her simple words bearing the weight of newly discovered dreams and once unimaginable possibilities. Ethan returned her hug, feeling her tiny body tremble slightly against his, not from fear or sorrow, but from a wave of emotion so great it seemed impossible for such a small body to contain. Over Emily's head, his eyes met Grace's. They were no longer strangers brought together by circumstance, nor just friends united by exchanged kindnesses. They were something more profound, more permanent, a family forged not by blood, but by choice, by care, by a mutual commitment. The sun finally set on the horizon, casting its last golden rays over the small porch. In that perfect moment, three hearts beat with a new rhythm of hope. Hope for a future that, for the first time, looked wide, bright, and full of possibilities. Weeks turned into months. Spring gave way to summer, and summer now showed the first signs that autumn was approaching. In that time, much had changed in Emily and Grace's life. Grace was fully recovered, her health restored thanks to proper rest and medical care. She'd returned to her sewing work, but under very different conditions. Ethan had helped her set up a small atelier in the back of the house, equipped with a new sewing machine and quality materials. He'd also introduced her to some contacts who needed specialized services, expanding her clientele beyond the local neighbors. Emily, on the other hand, was flourishing. At Hope Elementary, she was no longer the shy, withdrawn girl hiding in corners. She participated actively in class, had friends, and her drawings often graced the school's bulletin boards. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she took art classes at a studio downtown, a gift from Ethan Chown, who recognized her extraordinary talent. As for Ethan, he had found something his professional success had never given him: a greater purpose, a genuine connection, a chosen family. It was Sunday, and Grace's house was filled with wonderful smells. The aroma of roast chicken mixed with the scent of a freshly baked cake, creating that comforting atmosphere only meals made with love can achieve. A gentle breeze came in through the open kitchen window, slightly swaying the white curtains. The home's simple kitchen table was covered with a floral cloth, Grace's handiwork, each corner embroidered with small flowers. On it were colorful plates, neatly set, and a special meal lovingly prepared: rice, beans, roast chicken, and an orange cake at the center. It was a day of celebration, exactly 6 months since Ethan had come into their lives at the school fair. Grace made the final touches, arranging the food with care when the doorbell rang. Emily, who was drawing in the living room, immediately dropped her pencils and ran to the door. "I'll get it, Mum," she shouted, her quick footsteps echoing through the small house. Opening the door, her face lit up with the smile she always reserved for that special visitor. "Ethan!" He stood there holding a bottle of freshly made juice in one hand and a small wrapped package in the other. His calm smile was that of someone who had finally found his place in the world. "Hey, kiddo," he greeted, crouching down to receive the enthusiastic hug Emily always gave him. Grace appeared behind her daughter, drying her hands on a dish towel. There was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there months ago, the softness of someone who could finally breathe without the constant weight of worry. "Welcome," she said, approaching him for a grateful embrace, a gesture that had become second nature among them. Ethan walked in, handing the juice to Grace. "Hope you like passion fruit and orange." "I made it this morning. They're my favorites," Emily exclaimed, tugging on his hand. "Come see, I made a new drawing." Before being pulled into the living room, Ethan handed the small wrapped gift to the girl, almost forgot. "This is for you." Emily's eyes went round with excitement at the unexpected surprise. She carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a set of professional watercolor pencils, the kind real artists use. "Wow," she whispered, touching each pencil reverently. "They're the prettiest I've ever seen." "Your art teacher told me you're ready for more advanced techniques," Ethan explained, delighted at the girl's genuine happiness. Emily thanked him with another tight hug, then grabbed his hand again, determined to show him her latest masterpiece. In the living room, on the coffee table, lay a detailed, colorful drawing, the three of them sitting together at a table, hearts floating around them. Each detail had been lovingly rendered: Grace's favorite blouse, Ethan's occasional glasses, Emily's hair tied with the ribbon she'd received the week before. "It's us," Emily announced proudly, though it was obvious. "A family." The word hung in the air for a moment, profound and moving. Neither adult corrected her or questioned it. In many ways, it was true. They had become a family, not by blood or traditional definitions, but through invisible bonds of affection, respect, and the daily decision to be there for each other. "It's beautiful, Emily," Ethan praised sincerely. "You captured everything perfectly." Grace called them to the table where lunch awaited. They took seats that, without formal agreement, had become their usual spots, Grace at the head, Emily and Ethan on either side. Over lunch, their laughter was light, stories flowed naturally, and the atmosphere felt suspended in time, simple, genuine, and full of warmth. They talked about the previous week, plans for the next D, and the small everyday events that are, when woven together, formed the fabric of their intertwined lives. Emily spoke excitedly about her upcoming art presentation at school, about how her teacher had praised her shading technique. Grace shared how a new client had loved an especially elaborate party dress she'd sewn. Ethan talked about progress on the Hope Elementary Library renovation project he was funding in honor of his former literature teacher. As they finished eating and enjoyed the orange cake Grace had baked using her grandmother's recipe, Emily fixed Ethan with a shining gaze, a special sparkle in her eyes that appeared whenever she had something important to say. "Ethan, can I say something?" she asked, suddenly shy. He smiled, leaning in slightly. "Of course." Emily took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for a big announcement. "You're my best friend in the whole wide world." The simplicity and sincerity of her statement touched everyone at the table. Grace fought back tears, moved by her daughter's ability to express such genuine feelings. Ethan chuckled, not out of mockery, but from sheer joy, the joy of being loved so fully and unconditionally by such a pure heart. "And you're the best friend I could ever have, Emily," he replied with equal sincerity. Then he looked at Grace, his eyes conveying more than words ever could. "Thank you for letting me be part of this," he said, gesturing to include the table, the house, the three of them. "This is what matters." Grace nodded, fully understanding. In that instant, it wasn't about money or donations or promises. It wasn't about a wealthy man helping a needy family. It was about belonging, about bonds built on respect, nurtured day by day through small acts of care and mutual consideration. After dessert, Emily insisted on showing Ethan her latest project, an illustrated book she was creating, inspired by the bedtime stories her mother used to tell. Grace took the chance to start on the dishes, the sound of running water providing a comforting backdrop to the domestic scene. Later, when the sun began its descent in the sky, casting golden rays through the small kitchen window, the three of them went for a short walk around the neighborhood, a Sunday ritual they had settled into in recent weeks. Emily walked in the middle, holding both Ethan's and Grace's hands, occasionally skipping or twirling, her boundless energy infectious. And so, with the memory of freshly washed dishes still echoing in their minds and the sun bidding a gentle farewell to the day, they ended the celebration like a small family of souls who had chosen each other, who had met in the unlikeliest of circumstances and decided to stay together. Because sometimes the happy ending isn't in grand events or dramatic changes. Sometimes the happy ending, or rather the happy beginning of a new story, is a simple lunch with the right people, in the right place, with whole hearts full of gratitude. For Emily, who once crouched alone in a corner of the school courtyard, ashamed of her worn-out sneakers, this was the happy ending she deserved, and the start of limitless possibilities just beginning to take shape on the horizon of her life. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.